So again, repetition is how you learn things. The object of the Constitution was not to create a new country. That's not what they said. There was a country already here in 1776 called the United States of America, where there were 13 sovereign and independent states. So the purpose of the federal Constitution was to establish a federal government, not to do away with the original 13 states and all their powers. The purpose of the federal Constitution was to establish 3 departments of federal government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Make sense? Makes sense. All right. So let's go over the legislative branch. What does the legislative branch do? They write statutes. This is very important because they're going to tell you they write laws. They don't write laws. The law has already been written. Technically, I just read it to you for the past 20 minutes. They have a law. It's called the Common Law of England. So technically, nobody created a law when the federal government got set up. They were given the law and said, here you go. This is how you are to write statutes. This is how you are to execute statutes. This is how you are to make judgments. And they do that by, don't make me read it again, it can hardly be doubted that the Constitution is predicated upon the existence of the common law. So they don't make new laws. There's no such thing as a new law. Not in this country. They said this Constitution, which established 3 branches of government, is predicated upon the existence of the common law. The end. So when they write statutes, their job is to write statutes. In order for it to be called constitutional, it has to be based on the common law of England. It has to be based on the restrictions placed on the legislative branch through the common law of England. And they said this has not been denied by anybody who has maturely weighed the subject, right? So what does the legislative branch do? They write federal statutes for federal things. How do I know that? Because Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution says that that Congress has the power to exercise the exclusive legislation of Congress in all cases whatsoever over such district. So do they write statutes for Arkansas? No, they don't. It's not possible. Do they write statutes for Idaho? No. Idaho has a legislative branch. Do they write statutes for Nevada? No. Nevada has a legislative branch. Who do they write statutes for? They write statutes for the operation of the federal government. And they are bound by the common law of England not to exceed the rights of the people. I know that because the Supreme Court of Florida said, under the basic rules of statutory construction. What is that? What is statutory construction? That is a certain way in which they are supposed to construct statutes. It says statutory laws cannot impair rights given under a constitution. Does this make sense? The Supreme Court of Florida said under the basic rules, they said before we even begin, this is the foundation. When you write statutory laws, they cannot impair rights that were given under the Constitution. If they are called unconstitutional. Now, context is everything. They can write whatever they want. They just can't enforce everything that they write. Because if it can impair rights given under a constitution, it is unconstitutional. They can write unconstitutional things because it primarily pertains to them. But they can't write anything that would suppose to take away rights from the people as a whole. Does that make sense? So the Supreme Court of Florida said under the basic rules of constructing statutes, that's what the legislative branch do. All they do is yap and debate and create statutes all day, right? Under the basic rules of construction, statutory laws cannot impair rights given under a constitution. Does that make sense? Cool. Why do I say that? Because you'll go to hopefully you don't, but you'll go to court and or you'll go to an attorney and they'll say, "Oh, well, the Constitution's a living document, so that means that we can interpret it however we want." That's not possible. They do it. I'm just saying they're not supposed to do it. There's only one way to interpret the Constitution. You have to interpret it by the people who wrote it. And it can't be presupposed. Otherwise, be honest and get rid of it and rename the country. But don't say you're the federal government and then don't do anything based on the common law of England, right? If we're honest, they're not honest. But that's what I'm trying to get to. So they said it can hardly be doubted. This Constitution is based on the common law of England. You have to interpret its powers and the construction of the Constitution. Everything in the Constitution is not explainable without the common law. And I'll be honest, they don't explain anything in the common law. Because to the people at the time, they would have known these things. These to the people on a general level and to the people in the government, they would have known this. So, for instance, okay, well, they got the word dollar in the Constitution. Well, a dollar is not explained in the Constitution. The Constitution is seemingly not explained. They don't explain. They don't define anything. They just say, hey, we're creating a government. This is how you are to do it. And if you don't understand that, well, this is based on England and how they did things and why they wanted it to be based on the way they did it in England, well, then we'll never, which I didn't. I'm not going to act like I've known this forever. You'll never understand the Constitution. Right? So they got the word dollars in the Constitution. Okay, well, that's unexplainable without going to the common law of England. Because they say at common law, a dollar is a physical piece of silver. Okay, well, they don't explain that in there. They just say dollars. Today, they just use the word dollars. Dollars, dollars, dollars. Those are not dollars. They say if we put the word dollars on a piece of paper, that's a dollar. That's not a dollar. Right? It's not. The word dollars means something different in the Constitution than what comes out of an attorney's mouth today. That's what it means. It means something completely different. And they say it. They say, what is a trial by jury? Okay, well, you go to an attorney. Attorneys say, well, they had a trial by jury in Rome. Yeah, but this Constitution ain't based on what happened in Rome. This is based on what happened in England. See, people don't know England existed before the Roman Empire. So when we say trial by jury, you can't base it off of what happened in Rome. You got to base it based on what happened in England and why and how they did it in England. They said, okay, well, what are crimes in the Constitution? They said you got to go to the common law to know that. You know what they say in the Constitution? They say breach of the peace. Okay, well, that's what they call the crime at common law. They don't explain that in the Constitution. They don't even have it in what we would consider its proper context. What does it say? What is this? Article 1? Article 1, Section 6 says that senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and be paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall in all cases, except for treason, felony, and breach of a peace, be privileged from arrest. Okay, well, that breach of peace is a big word. That's a big phrase that they never talk about. right? But what a breach of peace meant in ancient England is incredibly significant in understanding the Constitution, right? Because when you get to a trial by jury in the third article, which I'm about to go over, well, they say the trial of all crimes shall be by jury. Okay, well, that's criminal law right there. So our criminal law has to be based on how they did it in ancient England, right? So let me go over the judiciary real quick. That way we'll have a better understanding of that, right? So what does the legislative branch do? They write statutes. They cannot write statutes. They can write statutes on whatever, but they can't write statutes and enforce statutes that would take away rights given under the Constitution. Does that make sense? That would be indicative of the Bill of Rights as well. Does that make sense? So they can write whatever. They just can't enforce whatever. All right.